In the darkness, city lights flicker in the rain. Surveillance screens pulse with fleeting shadows that chill the soul. 3 unsolved mysteries will slowly unfold in the city's dead of night. Your gaze will follow these shadows, traveling through time and memory, uncovering secrets long forgotten. The surveillance footage was accidentally deleted, yet reappears late at night. A familiar yet strange figure slowly walks through the empty office, carrying an unsolved secret. The mall at night felt unusually empty under the pale glow of security lights. The echo of a janitor's footsteps reverberated down the vacant corridors, while inside the security room, 4 monitors flickered with cold, white light. Peter, the night shift property manager, had worked here for 7 years. He was used to wandering the mall alone after hours, rarely startling anyone, and tonight was no different at first. But something subtle disturbed his routine. He sat in front of the monitors and pressed the playback button, wanting to review footage from 3 to 4 a.m., his standard nightly check. But the screen only displayed a black void with a line of text, "File corrupted or deleted." Peter's chest tightened. "No way," he muttered, restarting the system, checking the hard drive connections, even calling the backup server to pull the archive. Every attempt yielded the same result. Footage from that early morning had vanished. Oddly enough, all other cameras were intact. Only the escalator area on the mall's north side was missing footage entirely. Peter's mind went back over the past few nights' patrols. That area was rarely trafficked at this hour, mostly by a few night cleaners and the occasional delivery worker. He couldn't imagine anyone having the opportunity to enter the control room unnoticed, let alone target a specific video segment. He called tech support. On the other end, engineer Kate paused for a moment. "We can attempt data recovery," she said cautiously. "But from your description, it seems the footage may have been deliberately deleted." "Deliberately deleted?" Peter's voice wavered. "Why? Nobody's ever stolen from here, at least in the past 7 years." Kate didn't answer right away. Her tone was professional, measured. "Let's try recovering it first. If we find anything, we'll analyze it." After hanging up, Peter couldn't stop thinking about the possibilities. The most absurd thought was that someone had been watching him through the cameras. Or perhaps, something far worse. He recalled noticing a strange shadow near the escalator a few nights ago, which he had dismissed as a light reflection. Yet tonight, the feeling of unease returned stronger than ever. By midnight, the mall's mechanical background music hummed through the speakers, and the cameras blinked quietly as if observing silently. Peter double-checked the security room doors, no anomalies. But the missing footage remained a black void, a blank space in time, accusing him silently. He decided to inspect the escalator area himself. The floors were clean, everything appeared normal. But as he studied the shadows at the base of the escalator, he sensed a presence unlike that of the cleaners or delivery personnel, a presence the cameras had somehow missed. He couldn't touch it, couldn't prove it, only noted it mentally. Back in the security room, he opened the surveillance logs from the past 7 years, looking for irregularities. Each entry was a cold, mechanical cog in the system, functional but indifferent. That missing footage had become a void, a tear in time, swallowing his confidence in nighttime safety. At 3:45 a.m., Kate called. "Peter, we managed to recover some preliminary files. Some segments are viewable, though very blurry." Peter's heart raced. He knew, instinctively, that the real story was only beginning. The next early morning, Peter returned to the security room, the air filled with the bitter aroma of coffee and the low hum of machinery. He opened the preliminary recovered files from the tech department. Though the footage was blurry, with frames skipping, he could still make out a figure at the escalator at 3:15 a.m., moving with precision, almost as if intimately familiar with the area. Peter rewound, slowed, and zoomed in on each frame, analyzing them meticulously. The figure's gestures were unusual, unlike a normal customer or a janitor. He seemed to pause occasionally, reaching toward a corner at the base of the escalator. Peter's heart quickened. Was this theft? Or something more complex? He contacted engineer Kate, requesting a deeper forensic analysis. Using professional recovery tools, Kate discovered abnormal encryption in the deleted file. This wasn't typical technical failure. Someone had deliberately added protective measures before deletion. Meanwhile, Peter started speaking to potential witnesses. He found night shift cleaner Lisa, asking if she had noticed anything unusual that morning. Lisa recalled, "I think I saw a figure near the escalator, but I assumed it was a delivery person." She hesitated, then added, "The strange thing is, he was careful, avoiding the light." These details unsettled Peter. Someone had entered a monitored area and knew the camera's blind spots. He began to suspect prior reconnaissance, selecting the perfect time and place to act unnoticed. Peter dug into the mall's archives. Years ago, a minor theft had occurred in the escalator area, but the culprit was never found. Could this mysterious figure be connected to that unsolved case? Or was it mere coincidence? As the investigation deepened, Peter realized the issue was far from a simple technical glitch. The deleted footage suggested intentional concealment. Every blurred frame, every witness account, felt like a faint thread, pulling him closer to an unknown truth. The mall was empty as night deepened, the monitors flickering continuously. Peter drew a deep breath, staring at the images, feeling an invisible gaze from the shadows. Fear and curiosity intertwined. He knew the real story was only beginning to unfold. Peter sat in the security room, the flickering glow of the monitors the only light. On the screen before him was the latest recovered footage. Though still blurry, it was far clearer than the fragments from the previous night. The figure finally appeared in full view. At 3:22 a.m., at the base of the escalator, a tall figure moved slowly, dressed in dark clothing, steps exceptionally light, as if avoiding contact with any object. Zooming in on the footage, Peter could see the figure's hand hovering near the escalator railing, appearing to search or touch something. He occasionally glanced back, as if cautiously observing the surroundings. Peter's heart raced. Comparing the figure's movements with the layout of the area, Peter noticed the precision. The person avoided scuffing the floors or brushing against corner supports. Even the janitor's mop marks were untouched. This familiarity suggested someone intimately aware of every camera blind spot. Replaying the footage several times, Peter noticed subtle anomalies. In one frame, the figure paused, and a small cardboard box by the escalator seemed briefly moved, only to return to its original position moments later. Peter broke into a cold sweat. This was no ordinary thief or night wanderer. It was some kind of deliberate inspection or test. Peter contacted Kate for motion tracking and video enhancement. After a brief pause, she said, "Look at the faint reflections under his shadow. He's moving carefully." The precision here is almost impossible to be accidental. Peter's unease mixed with curiosity. Why move with such caution? Why at this hour, with no one around? Every frame seemed to transmit some unspeakable message. Then he noticed a tiny, nearly imperceptible detail in the corner, dust on the floor, slightly disturbed, as if an object had been temporarily placed there. The cameras barely captured it. Peter froze. This figure not only knew the environment, but was exploiting blind spots for some hidden operation. The night deepened, the mall empty. Peter's eyes were glued to the footage, feeling as if he were watching a carefully choreographed performance. Every action, every micro detail, hinted at pattern and purpose. Fear and curiosity intertwined. He knew the truth was emerging slowly, but the motive remained beyond his grasp. Peter leaned back, turning off the screen, taking slow breaths. The security room felt empty, yet tense, as if the figure from the footage was silently watching him from the shadows. Peter sat in the security room, eyes glued to the monitors. His notebook was filled with timestamps, observations of anomalies, and every detail from the recovered footage. The more he analyzed, the more he realized the mysterious figure wasn't just familiar with the environment. He appeared to be testing the boundaries of the surveillance system. To uncover the truth, Peter began reviewing the mall's archives. Years ago, there had been a theft in the escalator area with no identified suspect. More unsettling, a security guard had disappeared one night, the case left unresolved. Peter couldn't help but wonder, could this mysterious figure be connected to these unsolved events? He contacted the local police and provided them with the recovered footage. After initial analysis of facial features and body type, the officers ruled out known criminals in custody, but still could not identify the shadowy figure. Peter noticed that every appearance of the figure was linked to blind spots, the base of the escalator, corner corridors, unmonitored exits. The precision suggested someone trained or intimately familiar with the environment. Peter recalled what night shift cleaner Lisa had said. He seemed to be watching the lights and camera angles, avoiding detection. Her words echoed in his mind, making it harder to stay calm. The figure wasn't a casual intruder. It seemed to be carrying out a specific task. To dig deeper, Peter enlisted the mall's surveillance system provider to analyze every frame. Using high-precision motion tracking, the experts confirmed the figure's movements followed a highly regular pattern. Every pause, every motion seemed almost programmed. They suggested it was likely an insider or someone familiar with the system, not an external trespasser. A thought began to take shape in Peter's mind. Could this be an internal employee? Or someone who had previously worked on the mall's security systems? Clearly, someone had intentionally deleted the footage, attempting to conceal some truth. Late at night, Peter replayed the footage, scrutinizing every detail. He noticed the cardboard box at the base of the escalator moved in perfect alignment with the timestamps, skillfully avoiding camera views. The precision left him stunned. An outsider could never have executed such careful movements. Leaning back in his chair, tension and anticipation coiled within him. The truth was close, but the closer he got, the more complex the mystery seemed. The figure's identity, motives, and the reason for deleting the footage remained shrouded in layers of uncertainty. The room was silent, except for the hum of monitors. Shadows flickered across Peter's face as he took a deep breath, resolutely deciding, no matter what, he would uncover the truth behind this footage. In the security room at dawn, Peter gripped the mouse, watching the footage play again. After days of technical recovery and careful comparison, Kate finally reached a conclusion. Her voice carried disbelief. Peter, the mysterious figure is actually one of our internal security staff. Peter froze. In an instant, all the scenes in his mind, the precise movements, the familiarity with camera blind spots, suddenly made sense. Kate continued, he's a longtime night security and system maintenance employee. The footage was deleted due to accidental misoperation. The files were marked as part of a system update and got overwritten unintentionally. Peter rubbed his eyes in disbelief, realizing that the suspense of the past few days had been built on a simple human error. He had imagined crime, a lurking intruder, and connections to unsolved cases, but the real cause was mundane, an internal operational mistake. But the figure? Peter hesitated. Kate smiled faintly. The seemingly mysterious movements in the footage were just him performing routine checks around equipment and camera blind spots. When captured and zoomed in, they looked unusual. Even more surprisingly, police verification confirmed that the speculation about suspicious behavior and connection to past cases was entirely a misinterpretation caused by psychological projection. The empty corridors and blurry footage made ordinary actions appear deliberate and secretive. Peter leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. Days of tension ebbed like a tide, yet he realized the footage had delivered a profound experience in suspense, despite the final answer being ordinary. He looked at the empty escalator on the screen and smiled faintly. The real source of fear wasn't crime or conspiracy. It was human imagination in the face of the unknown. The surveillance footage was restored, but the fear and curiosity of that night lingered in his mind. The story had ended, yet for Peter, the experience was a psychological journey, one that reshaped his understanding of technology, environment, and human perception of the unknown. An aged photograph hides a figure in the corner, belonging to no one. It seems like a signal from time, hinting at a 20-year-old family secret. Collector Anna sat in her dimly lit study, flipping through her long-forgotten family albums. The thick pages smelled of age, each photograph a time capsule, freezing memories in still images. As she examined the corners and light reflections of each photo, she paused on a family gathering from 20 years ago. Something in the corner seemed out of place. Anna stared at the figure. Its outline was blurry, yet clearly inconsistent with its surroundings. The clothing and posture differed from everyone else, its orientation awkward, appearing suddenly at the edge of the frame. She tried zooming in, but even with a magnifying glass, the figure remained indistinct. She recalled the scene of the gathering, her grandmother's birthday party, the family laughing and celebrating. Every gesture familiar, every smile natural, except for this stranger at the edge, breaking the logic of time and space. Unease crept over Anna. She began to suspect that this photograph might conceal a secret overlooked for decades. Using an old camera and lights, she attempted to photograph the print again, hoping to reveal anomalies in shadows and reflections. Yet the figure remained undisturbed by light, as if it existed independently within the frame. Friends offered differing interpretations. Some suggested it was a trick of light, others an accidental placement, and a few whispered, maybe it's some kind of ghost. Anna shook her head, refusing to believe in the supernatural. Her intuition told her this was no ordinary photographic error. In that moment, the figure seemed to stare back at her across 20 years. She resolved to investigate, tracking every detail of the photograph, the people present, and the timeline. Unbeknownst to her, this pursuit would draw her into a suspenseful mystery spanning 2 decades. Anna decided to start with the photograph's time and place. She carefully went through family diaries and correspondence and confirmed the date, summer, 20 years ago, her grandmother's 70th birthday. Most family members were present, and every figure in the photo could be identified, except the blurry figure in the corner, for which no identity matched. She contacted surviving relatives, hoping they could provide clues. Most frowned, shaking their heads, claiming no recollection. One joked, maybe that's you from the future attending the party early. The laughter carried a subtle unease. Seeking a more professional analysis, Anna visited the local historical archives to understand the neighborhood context. Records mentioned minor thefts and unresolved break-ins from that period, though none appeared directly connected to her family. She noticed one detail. The photograph was taken during a time that coincided with a reported burglary nearby. Anna's heart skipped a beat. Could this figure be related to those incidents? She began to suspect that the photo might inadvertently have captured something unknown at the time. She interviewed neighbors and friends who had been around that night. Some recalled seeing a stranger near the community, though it had been ignored at the time. Others mentioned the photo's corner had been cluttered with children playing, but the figure's presence clearly did not match any child's activity. Every testimony and archival detail deepened Anna's confusion. The shadow seemed like a witness across time, not only appearing in the photo but subtly linked to events from that night. Anna realized that to unravel the mystery, she needed to reconstruct a complete timeline connecting the photo, the location, and historical events. Each clue was like a tiny thread, weaving a complex web in her mind. That night, sitting in her dim study, she gazed at the photo under the desk lamp, a mix of tension and excitement stirring in her chest. She understood that this pursuit was more than about an image. It was a journey into the secrets hidden in 20 years of memory. Anna held a magnifying glass, meticulously examining every corner of the photograph. She noticed that the shadow in the corner was not coincidentally at the edge. It seemed deliberately framed within the shot. The shadow always aligned along the same visual trajectory in the image. Her heart skipped a beat. Perhaps this was not an ordinary trick of light, but evidence of intentional action. To find more clues, she reorganized the family photo archive from the past decade and discovered a shocking pattern. Whenever the family held large gatherings, birthdays, weddings, or holiday celebrations, a similar shadow always appeared at the edges of the photos. The figure was almost never noticed by anyone present. Anna realized this repeated appearance was no coincidence. The shadow seemed to observe every family gathering, or perhaps deliberately leave a subtle signal. Each occurrence was connected to the positions and actions of family members, as if someone knew the movements of each person intimately. She began investigating the potential identity of the shadow. By comparing each photo's time, location, participants, and the shadow's position, she noticed a subtle pattern. The shadow always appeared near her grandmother, yet never interacted directly. She hypothesized that the figure might have a special connection to her grandmother. To confirm, she reached out to her grandmother's old friends and neighbors. One elderly neighbor recalled, "That shadow, I remember one time, your grandmother invited a young man to help with some tasks at the house. I can't recall his name." This revelation shocked Anna. The shadow's presence was no longer random. It could be linked to a specific person and perhaps an undisclosed family secret. Taking a deep breath, Anna began plotting all the evidence on a timeline. The photographs, the shadow, historical events, neighbors' recollections, they wove together like threads into a complex web. She realized that the secret behind the shadow was not merely photographic, but intertwined with her family's past, spanning 20 years. Late at night, she stared at the photograph again, her finger tracing the outline of the shadow. She silently resolved the next step would be finding the true identity behind the figure, or the truth might remain hidden forever. Anna spread out all the photographs, diaries, neighbors' recollections, and archival records on her desk, assembling them like a complex puzzle. She noticed an increasingly clear pattern. The shadow in the corner always appeared near certain objects in her grandmother's home: an antique clock, chairs by the dining table, even a cabinet in the kitchen. She recalled a phrase her grandmother had once said, "There are things in the house that not everyone can understand." Those words echoed in Anna's mind now, as if the shadow were responding to her contemplation. She realized the figure in the photograph was more than a mere presence. It seemed to be hinting at the family's hidden history. To investigate further, Anna examined her grandmother's personal letters and memos. In one letter, her grandmother wrote, "Some things must remain hidden until someone is ready to understand them." Anna's heart pounded. Could the shadow be a deliberate clue left by her grandmother? Cross-referencing the photos with family activities, Anna discovered that in every instance of the shadow, her grandmother was present, and the figure's position was always in a corner near her, almost as if guarding or signaling something. Anna's intuition told her this was intentional. Late at night, she examined the photographs closely, studying the relationship between the shadow and its surroundings. Suddenly, she noticed a subtle detail. The shadow's fingers seemed to point toward an object on the table. Anna picked up an old wooden box and compared it to the photograph, noticing faint scratches on one corner, aligned perfectly with the shadow's gesture. Her heart raced. The shadow not only appeared repeatedly, but seemed to indicate or hint at specific objects. 20 years of family memory appeared to be transmitted through this mysterious figure. Anna realized the truth was beginning to emerge, and only the final piece remained to reveal the full story. Anna closed her eyes, replaying the shadow's movements in her mind. She knew the next step was to locate the person connected to that moment in time to fully unlock the decades-old mystery. The shadow's presence had finally brought her closer to the truth. Anna finally managed to contact the neighbors and old family friends from that time. One elderly housekeeper recalled clearly, 20 years ago, her grandmother had indeed hired a young man named Henry. He was responsible for documenting family events, organizing files, and safeguarding important items. The housekeeper hesitated before adding, "He was extremely careful, always staying in the corners, hardly disturbing anyone, often going unnoticed." Anna suddenly realized the shadow in the photographs was Henry. He was neither a ghost nor a stranger, but a diligent assistant, quietly protecting the family's secrets. Every appearance at the edge of the photos was his way of ensuring valuable possessions were safe or silently recording family history. She reopened her grandmother's letters, reading between the lines. Her grandmother had subtly indicated that Henry was leaving clues, to be discovered only when someone in the family was ready to understand the past. The photographs and recurring shadow were a time signal from her grandmother and Henry, guiding future generations to uncover the hidden secrets within everyday life. Returning home, Anna opened the old wooden box, finding neatly preserved documents, film negatives, and her grandmother's diary from 20 years ago. Every piece of evidence had been quietly guarded, and Henry's presence ensured that nothing was lost. Anna exhaled deeply, feeling both moved and relieved. The shadow that had perplexed and unsettled her was, in truth, a symbol of her grandmother's wisdom and Henry's loyalty. After 20 years, the mystery was finally resolved. She gently touched the familiar corner of the photograph, smiling, "I understand your guardianship now." The shadow in the photo no longer evoked fear. It represented family history, protection, and guidance, reminding her to cherish memories and understand the past. The story concludes, but for Anna, it was more than a family mystery solved. It was a passage of trust and care spanning 2 decades. The shadow's existence was not about fear, but about protection and silent guidance. Every night at midnight, a surveillance camera captures a recurring figure. It interacts with no one, patrolling in the shadows, hiding an unknown purpose. Night had fallen over the city, and the office building was empty. Only the faint glow of motion sensor lights illuminated the elevators and hallways. Security guard Martin sat in the monitoring room, eyes fixed on the screens. The stillness of the night made him instinctively alert. At 1:15 a.m., the surveillance camera captured a shadow at the far end of the corridor. Martin rubbed his eyes, certain it wasn't a delay or light reflection. The figure moved slowly and deliberately, carrying nothing, touching no doorknobs, and turning on no lights. The shadow seemed to float over the floor, its movements natural yet hauntingly solitary. Martin quickly scrolled through past recordings and noticed a startling pattern. This shadow appeared every night at the same hour, following nearly identical paths. From the elevator, down the main corridor, and disappearing into the stairwell or basement exit. No matter the day or the weather, the figure appeared like clockwork. Comparing the shadow's path with the building's floor plan, he realized it always moved through camera blind spots. Even with careful observation, the figure's full outline was almost impossible to capture. A shiver ran down Martin's spine. This was no ordinary night wanderer. Someone was deliberately hiding. Out of curiosity, he copied the footage to his computer and enhanced the images. Every movement of the shadow was mechanically precise. Martin muttered under his breath, "Who is this? And why do they come every night?" He remembered minor thefts in the building months ago, items moved without signs of intrusion. Could the shadow be related? Yet the regular nightly appearances seemed unnecessary for ordinary theft. In the silent monitoring room, Martin felt a chill. He realized the figure was following some unknown pattern or purpose, and he might already be entangled in a secret yet to be revealed. Martin sat in the monitoring room, floor plan spread out before him, marking each point where the shadow appeared. He was astonished. Every path aligned closely with emergency exits, camera blind spots, and the locations of important stored items. He reviewed footage from the past month, comparing times and routes. The shadow always appeared between 1:15 a.m. and 1:30 a.m., moving along nearly identical paths with precision. Even when cameras were repositioned or added, the figure evaded their view, as if intimately familiar with the building's layout. Martin began to suspect that the figure was no ordinary intruder. It might be connected to historical events or internal personnel. He cross-referenced past theft incidents, noting that minor incidents coincided with dates of the shadow's appearances, yet no doors were forced and no alarms triggered. To analyze further, Martin built a 3D model of the building and input the shadow's movement paths. The simulation showed that each route passed near key points, file cabinets, storage rooms, office drawers, as if performing a deliberate inspection. A sense of urgency rose in Martin. The shadow was not wandering aimlessly. It appeared to be executing a task. He began to consider the possibility of a long-term plan, or someone with intimate knowledge of the building conducting precise nightly checks. He contacted several night shift staff and cleaning personnel. Some recalled the figure as unfamiliar yet consistently seen in the shadows, never interacting with anyone. Others noted that the figure never entered office spaces, remaining only in corridors and stairwells. Martin realized that the truth might lie in the combination of the shadow's paths and the building layout. Every step, every disappearance, could be a clue or a signal guiding him toward a deeper secret. In the stillness of night, the shadow appeared once again on the monitor. Holding his breath, Martin knew he was closer to uncovering the mystery, but an eerie tension gripped him. Martin reviewed all the footage and path analyzers, and suddenly noticed an anomaly. The shadow paused for a few seconds at each key item location, as if observing or verifying something. Though brief, the precision and regularity of these pauses were astonishing when footage was slowed down. He began to suspect that the figure's purpose went beyond simple patrolling or observing and might involve a deeper objective. To investigate, he contacted former employees who had managed the building's night operations. They revealed that years ago, an employee responsible for archives and security systems had abruptly left for personal reasons, largely unnoticed. Combining the shadow's pattern with the locations of critical items, Martin hypothesized that the shadow could very well be that former employee. The nightly appearances were not for theft, but to inspect, maintain, and possibly safeguard important items. Martin decided to follow the figure himself. At 1 a.m., he quietly traced the shadow's usual path. The corridors were empty, and the shadow emerged from the elevator as usual, moving with steady steps. Holding his breath, Martin watched as the shadow stopped at an old archive room, produced a key, opened a cabinet, meticulously organized, and inspected the files, then silently departed. Martin was stunned. The shadow was a guardian of the building's historical records, ensuring their security through nightly vigilance. The mystery and fear surrounding it were merely misunderstandings of a disciplined, silent duty performed day after day. He exhaled with a mix of relief and awe. He had been drawn to the shadow's enigma, but was equally moved by the dedication and responsibility behind it. The figure's presence was not a threat, but a form of guardianship, a quiet promise across time. Returning to the monitoring room, Martin archived the footage and recorded the shadow's path. He knew the truth was now clear, but the secret would continue to exist through the shadow, revealed only to those who paid attention. After several nights of tracking, Martin felt he had nearly mastered the shadow's routine: elevator, main corridor, stairwell, archive room, almost down to the second. Yet on the third night, he noticed something unusual. The shadow stopped longer than usual at the archive room door. Martin held his breath, leaning closer to the screen. He saw the figure pull out a thick folder from the cabinet, examine it carefully, and then discreetly slip one page into a pocket. Martin's heart skipped a beat. This time, the shadow wasn't merely organizing or inspecting, it was taking something. Rewinding the footage and comparing with previous nights, he saw that this was the first deviation from normal behavior. The timing and movement were deliberate, as if concealing the removal of something important. He cross-referenced old archive photos and building management logs, noting that several key documents had been marked missing or unreturned over the past months. These missing files coincided with the shadow's path and timing. Martin began to suspect that the figure's motives were not purely protective. Heart-pounding, Martin contacted the building administration. They revealed that years ago, some confidential documents related to critical company projects had been secretly stored or moved by the former employee. The shadow's nightly appearances were not only patrols, but also a method of maintaining an unpublicized order. Someone was guarding, and someone was manipulating. Late at night, Martin returned to the monitoring room, staring at the stairwell where the shadow vanished. He realized that this mysterious nightly figure was both a guardian and a covert executor. The truth was far more complex than he had imagined, and he was only a part of the unfolding story. Leaning back in his chair, Martin silently warned himself. Next, he had to uncover the shadow's true identity and determine the significance of the removed documents, or the mystery would remain unsolved. After days of investigation and reviewing footage, Martin finally contacted John, the former building administrator, the employee who had left years ago. John admitted that he had appeared every night to protect important archives and assets within the building. He explained some of the company's critical project files contained sensitive information and needed special oversight. Management didn't know I took it upon myself. I checked the archives every night to make sure nothing was stolen or damaged. Recently, some documents needed to be temporarily relocated, which explains the action you saw. The shadow's routine, precise movements, and nightly appearances were all intended to safeguard company secrets, not to cause harm or commit theft. Martin exhaled in relief and astonishment. The seemingly eerie actions were acts of responsibility and loyalty. Returning to the monitoring room, Martin organized and archived the footage, compiling a full report. He finally understood the nightly shadow was not a ghost nor an intruder, but a devoted employee quietly fulfilling his duties. The documents taken were simply relocated or protected, with no malicious intent. Reflecting on the past few days, the tension, fear, and curiosity he had felt, Martin smiled. He realized that what often appears mysterious on the surface can conceal human traits that are admirable: dedication, responsibility, and steadfastness in one's work. On the midnight monitoring screen, the shadow appeared once again, slowly moving through the corridor. Martin knew that this time, he truly understood its meaning: guardianship and responsibility, not fear or the unknown. Night falls, and the shadows vanish across the empty city. Surveillance, photographs, and memories capture not just images, but secrets of time and guardianship of human nature. 3 stories, 3 mysteries, ultimately revealing that behind fear and enigma lie responsibility, loyalty, and protection. When you look up at the night, might you notice those shadows silently watching? They remind us that memories, history, and secrets never truly disappear. They only wait to be understood.